Sir, I can speak 9 languages, Daniel Carter said, his voice steady though his small hands gripped the straps of his worn backpack. The Arab billionaire, Mr. Hakimi, leaned back in his wide leather chair, staring at the boy in disbelief. Then, with a grin that carried both arrogance and mockery, he let out a laugh that bounced against the glass walls of the penthouse office. "Boy, don't make me laugh," Hakimi said, shaking his head. "You can hardly speak English without mistakes, and now you stand here claiming you know 9 languages?" Daniel's mother, Ruth Carter, shifted nervously beside him. In her hand was a small cleaning bucket, half filled with rags and sprays. She had worked in this very office for 5 years, scrubbing marble floors and wiping polished desks. Every day she had swallowed insults and disrespect because she had 2 children to raise alone. Today, though, she wished she had never brought her son along. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice trembling, "don't say such things. Please apologize to Mr. Hakimi before you make things worse." But Daniel did not look away. His dark eyes stayed fixed on the man in front of him. "No, Mom," he said softly. "I told the truth." Hakimi chuckled again, clearly enjoying himself. He reached for a golden pen on his desk, twirling it lazily between his fingers, as if this was nothing more than a game to him. "You are bold, I'll give you that," Hakimi said. "But boldness is not the same as knowledge. Tell me then, what are these 9 languages you claim to know? Impress me." Ruth's knees felt weak. Her son was only 14. What if he embarrassed himself? What if Hakimi fired her because of this? She could not afford to lose the only job that kept food on the table. Daniel lifted his chin. "English, Spanish, French, German, Arabic, Mandarin, Russian, Italian, and Portuguese," he said clearly, counting each one on his fingers. For the first time, Hakimi's laughter paused. The names rolled off Daniel's tongue smoothly, not rushed, not forced. There was a calmness to his tone that did not match his young age. Still, Hakimi smirked. "A rehearsed list," he said coldly. "Any child can memorize language names. That proves nothing." Ruth lowered her head, shame pressing heavy on her shoulders. She wanted to grab Daniel's hand and pull him out of that office before things got worse. But Daniel stood firmly, like a tree refusing to bend in the wind. "Sir," he said again, "if you want, I can show you." Hakimi leaned forward now, eyes narrowing. He was used to people trembling around him, not standing tall. The boy's steady tone irritated him, yet there was something else, a strange pull of curiosity. "Show me," he repeated. "And how do you plan to do that? Speak Arabic to me, boy? Do you even know how to say hello in Arabic?" Daniel glanced at his mother, who looked pale and worried, then turned back to Hakimi. Slowly, he spoke a full sentence in classical Arabic, his words smooth, clear, and structured with perfect grammar. The billionaire's face froze. The sentence was not one a tourist could learn from a guidebook. It was advanced, the kind of phrase that only someone with true knowledge could put together. Ruth blinked, not understanding the words, but sensing the sudden shift in the room. For the first time in years, she saw Mr. Hakimi speechless. Silence hung heavy. Hakimi set down his golden pen, his fingers stiff. "Where did you learn that?" he asked, his voice lower now, no longer playful. Daniel allowed himself a small, calm smile. "At the community library, sir. They have free programs every afternoon. I go there after school." Hakimi stared, struggling to believe. A boy from Eastwood District, the son of his cleaning lady, speaking like a trained diplomat. It rattled him. Ruth clutched her bucket tighter, her heart torn between pride and fear. Pride because her son had just shown courage she never expected. Fear because she knew how dangerous it was to outshine a man like Hakimi. Hakimi's lips tightened. He tried to laugh again, but the sound came out thinner this time. "Anyone can learn a sentence or 2, he muttered. "That doesn't mean you speak 9 languages. I don't have time for childish tricks." Daniel reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded paper. His hands were steady as he placed it on Hakimi's desk. Hakimi unfolded it, and his eyes widened as he saw an official certificate, stamped and signed. You got this from Hamilton University?" Hakimi asked, his voice cracking with disbelief. "Yes, sir," he nodded. "Yes, sir. It proves fluency in several languages. I also have more certificates." Hakimi gripped the paper tighter, his arrogance slowly melting into something else, something closer to fear. Ruth looked at her son with tears filling her eyes. She could not believe what she was seeing. Daniel stood taller, his voice quiet but firm. "Sir, you asked me to prove myself. Now I have." The room went silent. Hakimi's hand trembled slightly as he held the certificate. For the first time, the powerful billionaire felt like the ground under his feet was shifting. And deep inside, Daniel knew this was only the beginning.
Hakimi's hand shook slightly as he held the certificate. He looked at the seal, the signatures, the official stamps. Everything about it seemed real. Still, his pride refused to let him admit it. "This could be fake," Hakimi said coldly, forcing a smirk onto his face. "Anyone with a computer can print such a thing. You think you can fool me, boy?" Ruth's heart sank. She feared Hakimi would tear the paper apart and throw them both out. She had seen this man humiliate workers before, and she knew his temper could be cruel. But Daniel did not flinch. He calmly reached into his backpack again and pulled out 2 more documents. He laid them on the desk, one by one. "This one is from the Eastwood Community Library. It shows my completion of the Advanced Linguistics program. And this one is from an online course in simultaneous translation, both signed and verified." Hakimi snatched the papers and scanned them quickly. His jaw tightened. Each had official marks, dates, and signatures, no sign of forgery. Ruth stared at her son, her chest tight with emotion. She remembered nights when Daniel stayed up with books borrowed from the library, studying under a weak lamp, while she returned home exhausted from long shifts. She thought he was just passing time. She never knew he had been building something greater. Hakimi leaned back in his chair, his arrogance beginning to crumble. Yet he tried again to cover his unease. "Documents prove little. Anyone can cheat online. Words on paper mean nothing in this world." Daniel opened his backpack once more and took out a small tablet. He powered it on and clicked into a video call application. Within moments, the face of a woman appeared on the screen, a professor sitting at a desk filled with books. "Professor Liang, can you please confirm to Mr. Hakimi how I performed in your business translation course?" His tone was smooth and natural. Ruth could not understand a word, but Hakimi froze as the professor answered rapidly in Mandarin, her voice warm with pride. "Mr. Hakimi," she switched to English, "this young man is the most brilliant student I have taught in 15 years. His Mandarin is fluent, his understanding sharper than many adults. He is extraordinary." Hakimi ended the call abruptly, his hands trembling. He had expected to catch the boy lying, but instead he had been publicly proven wrong. Silence filled the office once again. Ruth's breathing was shallow. She feared Hakimi's anger, yet a spark of pride filled her heart. "Who taught you all this?" Hakimi asked finally, his voice quieter now, almost uncertain. Daniel looked at his mother before answering. "No one, sir. I taught myself. When my mom lost her second job during the pandemic, she still worked day and night to keep us alive. I had time after school, so I went to the library. I wanted to learn something useful. At first, I struggled, but slowly, one language led to another. And now I can speak 9. Hakimi's lips pressed tightly together. He glanced at Ruth, who stood silently, her eyes moist. For years he had seen her only as a cleaning lady, but now he realized she had raised a boy whose discipline outshone many of his richest employees' children. Hakimi rose from his chair and walked to the window. Empire City stretched wide before him, tall towers piercing the sky. He had built his empire with wealth and pride, but in that moment he felt strangely small. "Why languages?" Hakimi asked, still staring at the city. "You could have wasted time like other kids. Why not play games or run the streets?" Daniel's voice was calm but strong. "Because, sir, when you speak to someone in their own language, they stop seeing you as a stranger. They start seeing you as human." Ruth gasped softly. The truth of those words pierced her. She had lived her whole life being treated as less, invisible because of her race and class. But her son had just said the one thing she had always felt deep inside. Hakimi turned back, his expression dark. For the first time he felt the sting of shame. He had used his wealth to judge others, forgetting his own past. But before he could speak, Daniel placed one more item on the desk, a small recorder. He pressed play. From the device came Hakimi's own voice. "These black workers are all the same, lazy, uneducated, always blaming others. That's why I never put them in high positions." Ruth covered her mouth in shock. Her knees weakened. Hakimi's face drained of color. He remembered saying those words in the elevator, believing no one else had been there. He had not noticed the boy standing quietly in the corner. Where did you get this?" he stammered. Daniel's voice was steady. "I recorded it, sir. And in Maryland, one person's consent is enough to make a recording legal." Hakimi's hand trembled as he reached for the recorder. The weight of his own words filled the room like poison. Ruth's tears slid down her cheeks. Shame and fear battled inside her, but there was also pride. Her son had just done the impossible. He had turned the power of a billionaire against him. The office grew unbearably silent. Daniel stood tall, his young face calm, his eyes unshaken. "Now, Mr. Hakimi, it's time you understand who is truly powerless and who is not."
The recorder blinked on the desk, its small light glowing like a warning. Mr. Hakimi stared at it, his lips pressed tightly, his hands restless. For a man who owned towers, cars, and companies, he suddenly looked cornered. "You can't use this," Hakimi said, his voice shaking. "It was private. Do you realize what you're doing? You could destroy your mother's job. You could destroy your own future." Ruth Carter's knees weakened. She wanted to beg her son to stop, to take back everything before it went too far. Losing this job would mean losing the only income she had. Fear crawled through her body, but when she looked at Daniel, she saw no fear in him, only calm determination. "Sir," Daniel said, his voice steady, "what destroys the future isn't truth, it's lies. It's people like you who use power to keep others down." Hakimi swallowed hard, anger and shame mixing inside him. He had built his empire believing money could silence anyone. Yet here stood a 14-year-old boy with nothing but a backpack, shaking him to the core. "What do you want from me?" Hakimi asked finally, his voice low. He reached into his bag and pulled out another paper, this one typed neatly with clear demands. He slid it across the desk. "I want my mother promoted to supervisor with a fair salary. I want you to start a scholarship program for kids from poor communities, and I want you to hire me as a junior consultant." Hakimi's eyes widened. "Consultant? You're just a boy." "I speak 9 languages. I've already saved your company from mistakes in Arabic, and I can save you millions more if you let me." Ruth's eyes filled with tears. She had raised her son with nothing but prayer and hard work, never dreaming he would stand this boldly before a billionaire. Hakimi picked up the paper with trembling fingers. The terms were clear, fair, and professional. It wasn't greed, it was justice. yet his pride resisted. "And if I refuse?" he asked. Daniel looked at his watch. "Then this recording will leave this office in less than 3 minutes. Journalists, lawyers, and the Justice Department will all hear your own words." The silence grew heavy. Ruth's heart pounded. She had never seen Hakimi cornered like this. He usually laughed at others' pain. Now he was the one sweating. Finally, Hakimi picked up his gold pen. His signature moved shakily across the page. When it was done, he let out a long breath. "You forced my hand, boy," he said. Daniel shook his head. "No, sir. I gave you a choice. You chose." Ruth's tears slid freely now. For the first time, she felt dignity rise inside her. She was no longer just the cleaning lady. She was the mother of a boy who had changed the balance of power in a single day. Hakimi looked at her with new eyes. "Ruth," he said quietly, "you raised a genius." "I raised a man," she replied firmly, "a man who knows his worth." Daniel tucked the recorder back into his bag. "For your peace of mind, sir, I'll keep this safe. But remember, if you ever try to break your word, I will not hesitate to use it." Hakimi let out a weak laugh, though it carried no cruelty this time. "You're frighteningly smart," he admitted. "No," Daniel replied. "I just prepared." 6 months later, the Eastwood Community Library was full of young boys and girls gathered around new scholarship desks. Mr. Hakimi himself visited often, no longer the same arrogant man. His company was thriving, rebuilt on fairness instead of fear. Ruth walked the halls of Empire Tower now in a supervisor's suit, respected by all. And Daniel, at only 15, sat at conference tables, translating business deals worth millions. A journalist once asked Hakimi how it felt to be advised by a teenager. He smiled and answered, "It feels like the most valuable lesson I ever paid for. True power isn't in money. It's in recognizing the brilliance of those the world calls small." And Daniel, standing beside his mother, added softly, "Never let anyone tell you that where you come from decides what you can become."
Dear viewers, what you just heard is more than the story of Daniel and his mother. It is a reminder that no matter how poor or looked down on someone may be, true value comes from courage, knowledge, and dignity. Prejudice can blind the rich, but truth will always open eyes. Daniel showed us that where you come from does not decide where you can go. And Ruth showed us that a mother's sacrifice can raise a child who changes the world. If this story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Like this video, share it with others, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. And remember to subscribe for more stories that prove wisdom and justice are stronger than money and pride.